I hereby call the City of Lloydminster Governance and Priorities Committee meeting to order on Monday, September 18th. We will now take a moment of personal reflection. A reminder of all members of council are obligated, this meeting is for discussion and information gathering only. All decisions will occur during council meetings. We thank all of our presenters for their time. At this time, I would ask if there's any amendments to the, or proposed changes to the agenda. City Manager.
Your Worship and Council, we would like to add one to in camera. It's a discussion with respect to our policy on lands. Under FOIP 16.1, I think it should be in camera. So if you could add that, I'd appreciate that.
And that would be an 8.3 then?
Yes.
All right. Not seeing any further adjustments, I will look to council for direction and a formal recommendation on today's agenda. Council Buckingham.
Move the agenda dated September 18, 2017 be approved as amended.
Seconder. Councilor Dowchuk. Any further discussion, question? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes from the previous GPC meeting has been circulated. I would ask if there's Councilor Tegner.
That the Government and Priorities Committee minutes dated August 30th, 2017 be approved.
Seconder. Councilor Baker. Any questions or comments from those minutes? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving to item 4, public presentations. I do not believe there's any. Thank you. Moving to item number 5, administrative presentations. City Manager.
Yes, Your Worship and Council, we have presented to you in your package a copy of the accounts payable summary and financials from July. I have Brooke Fair here, who is our manager of finance and is also the treasurer. So if you have any questions, I'll ask Brooke to come forward.
Good afternoon, Brooke. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'll look to council for any questions or comments about the financials. Certainly, it's been another busy month in the city, and I think that with the recent decision of City Council to move to a procurement card, I expect we're going to see some changes in our financial report a little bit. Can you allude to that a little bit?
So we plan on implementing the procurement cards in November after we go live with our new financial system. So the current accounts payable report that you receive will likely be a little bit shorter, as we'll be moving more of those purchases towards the P cards, and you'll be getting an additional report for the P cards portion.
Excellent, and I'm sure that we're all waiting with holding our breath on that diamond software, because I think that certainly there's information that will hopefully be able to be clarified a lot easier from that perspective, because we realize there's a series of checks and balances in the system, and expenses are paid for both employees and 10 different things, but sometimes the detail, as they say, the devil in the details there, but if we can't see it as easily as we like, because I understand how you pull information from various sources to produce this report, and appreciate the work that goes into it, but it's not easy to seek the clarity sometimes that we would like to see. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. As we're talking about the new software, how are things? How's the implementation going, and are we on track to get that done in time?
Things are going pretty well. We are still on track to implement at the end of November.
Good.
Any other questions, councilors? Council Baker?
We're going to shorten the report up by about 140 pages every month, aren't we?
I sure hope we get down to the bottom 20, because there is approximately 140 pages of financial details for 1 month in our city, and I think that we are a very busy city. There's a lot of activities going on, and because everything from people putting deposits, having deposits refunded for programming that's canceled or they've withdrawn, we see a
We
lot
shouldn't
of...
just do.
No, we shouldn't, and it's...
But it's really, to try and get it all figured out, it's quite a challenge.
my hat's off to
And I'm
our-
sure everybody in this room's got a pin, but a summary of some of these things would sure make it more simpler for the average person to read it. And it's thorough, but to try to put it all together in all sincerity, it's not easy.
No, hats off to the finance department, because keeping the books straight and when we're dealing with an $80 million budget and accounting for GST as an example, because every item that's got a line item has a GST input credit if it's eligible. There's a lot of information there, and I don't think people realize unless you're right in the midst of it. And our good councillor Torson, who works in it every day, he's I'm sure he would agree with us that it's a struggle. Any other comments? We certainly appreciate the information work that the finance team puts together every month. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So when will we see the first report in the new system?
We'll report on implementing until the end of November, and then the beginning of January, we'll
Okay.
probably do the first report.
Okay, good, thank you.
Start out the new year with the right foot. Fabulous. Thank you very much, Mark. Moving to, was there any other questions regarding, we certainly had the accounts payable part, and I'm sure if there were any other questions for finance at this time. We know we've had some various reports from the finance team that gives us an idea of where we stand financially in the city. Not seeing any, we'll move to 5.2, the city manager, Mr. Fire Services.
Yes, Your Worship and Council, very pleased to present to you Chief Jordan Newton, Fire Chief, and he is going to come up and make a presentation to Council, one that he made to the Executive a while back, and he said we think this should come forward to a Governance Priorities Committee. I think it will foster some good conversation. I've also asked him to bring along some of his key members, and maybe he could introduce them to the Council and audience.
Fire
Yeah.
Chief.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I would like to take a second and introduce my team, if I may. From your left to the right, you can stand when called, firefighter Mike Reddy, also in a dual uniform as a peace officer on his lunch here today. Next, we have Deputy Fire Chief Kelvin Nicholas. Next, we have Training Officer Captain Kevin Leiter. I would like to point out that these last two gentlemen have 37 years of experience on this department and 34 years of experience on this department, so quite an amazing feat. Next we have Senior Firefighter Don Sheely, Captain Mark Lane, Captain Maverick Hahn, and Deputy Fire Chief Brad Martin. So thank you for letting me introduce my team for you today. So what I'm here to do today is open up the discussion of what we see in our fire services and where we see our fire services going into the future. There is some challenges today that we are going to share them, and we're going to look to the future. So what we're going to do is we'll look at a little bit of the history of the Lloydminster Fire Department. So in 1905, that's the first record I have of the fire services in Lloydminster. So we had a fire department in Alberta and a fire department in Saskatchewan. One for the town, one for the village. Still when we were separated organizations. In 1929, the Great Fire of Lloydminster occurred. That was that large downtown conflagration that caused in that day about $1 million of damage. So with that, in 1930, the two parts of our city amalgamated into what we know as the city of Lloydminster today. A large portion of that was to share our fire services, share our resources between Alberta and Saskatchewan. In 1979, Lloydminster hired a paid fire chief and a paid deputy fire chief. This is a growing community. Mayor, council, administration in that day thought it was a need. Our population was about 7,000. In 2010, Station 2 was constructed. That is the station over by Lakeland College. That services the southern and western sprawl. As our residential suburbia grows, it allows us to maintain acceptable response times. In 2011, we added another paid deputy fire chief position, and that was largely to maintain that fire hall and those apparatus. 2017, and just a week ago, we hired a paid training officer, and that position is going to look after training needs today and into the future. There's also the safety will be in that portfolio, so that will be making sure that our staff is safe before we ever respond to an emergency, as well as on scene when we do respond. So when we look at our present day fire department, we have a total membership on our fire department consisting of 33 members. 4 members are paid, so that's a paid fire chief, 2 deputy fire chiefs, and our training officer. And then we have 29 volunteers, or paid on call. Now we do budget for 40 volunteers. That is what we say is our minimum staffing. We do have a hard time maintaining 40 volunteers on our department. Now we also have a 70% turnover rate in the first 5 years as a paid on call firefighter. So in a industry that's highly specialized as firefighting, it is hard to have people have all the skills necessary to perform services for our community with only limited years of experience. So that brings us to some of today's challenges. So some of our challenges is, number one, we need to remain sustainable. We need to be sustainable for our community to provide those emergency services. We need to continue to meet industry standards and best practices. The industry as we know it today is changing very rapidly. There's legislation coming into effect that's going to put minimum standards on place with things like training, as well as inspections. And there's also response time that we'll have to make as part of the building code. And number 3 is we need to seek to find a balance for our staff. So our staff can balance their work, their careers, their life, and their volunteer time, but we still need to maintain an effective and efficient fire service. So when we start to look at why we have staff turnover, when I became fire chief of the city 2.5 years ago, I started conducting exit interviews for everyone that left the fire department, because we do have large amounts of them. So in talking to them, I found 3 reasons why we're having turnover. The age. So we have members that are at the end of their careers, ones that are looking to move on to retirement and the next stage of their life, as well as we have members that are young in age. When you're young, your life's changing very rapidly. You're starting families, you have a significant other, you're looking to find and establish yourself in a new career, or even post-secondary education. So as life changes rapidly, it's hard to commit to the time needed for our fire department. Another one's the economy. We ask the employers in Lloydminster to allow their firefighters to leave if there is a fire. With the economy being the way it has been the last couple of years, it is hard for businesses to allow, when they're already running on minimum staff, to allow their staff to leave. Also, with our economy being a heavy industrial city, we have a lot of staff, or a lot of residents, that work shift work. With the standards we have in place right now, our fire department does not cater to people that might work shift work and away from home. As well as we do have some of our staff in the past that have had to move away to different communities to find work. Another reason is the family demands at home, both for our male employees and our female employees, with a trend now of home life working to two working parents, both mom and dad are working, as well as most children now being in extracurricular activities. As I'm sure most people are aware, as now school's back in, there's a lot of demand to be at home and spend time at home. So that limits the amount of additional time that you can volunteer and give your time back to the community. So now that we know the challenges, we can start to look at the future and look for solutions. We know that we haven't changed the way we've operated since at least the 70s, and I don't know prior to that. I do know the 70s because of my two senior members here. So we know that change is the law of life, and those who look at only the past or present are certain to miss the future. We need to change and evolve with our community to ensure that we can keep our community safe. So with every challenge, there's opportunities. So with me conducting the exit interviews, we found that family and home life demands is the main reason for leaving the Lloydminster Fire Services. Out of all the employees that I've had leave, I've only had one employee leave because they weren't enjoying it anymore. So if we know that family and home life demands are the main reason for leaving, we need to find a solution to our challenges. Challenge one being remaining sustainable for our community, as well as also finding that balance for our staff for work, life, and volunteer time. As you can see, there's a graph on the board. This is our last 6 years of our turnover rates. So year over year, we took count of our turnover. I do know that there is a bar that says unknown, that is 10 people. That 10 staff members is from 2011, 2012, and the first portion of 2013, some of our tracking wasn't the best. So we know that we're losing approximately 10 people every year that are resigning from our fire department. So that's probably approximately 1/3 of our department is turning over year. So to maintain efficient training and have highly qualified staff for our community can be quite difficult, but we have been maintaining. So when we found all the challenges that we're currently facing, myself as well as the two deputies started looking at solutions. Because for every challenge, there's a solution. And as we were going through things, there never seemed to be one thing that could solve all our problems. So we asked ourselves, do we need to really recreate the wheel? I said, no, there's fire departments in every city, every municipality, every rural municipality in the country. So why don't we look to our neighbors and see how they're managing with their issues, with their challenges? So myself, as well as my two deputies, looked across all of Western Canada, right from the western border of Ontario, right to the ocean. And when we looked at departments, we looked at those small to mid-sized cities and how they were supplying services to their community. We eliminated all the departments, much like our Moose Jaw, our Prince Alberts, our Leduc, our Spruce Groves, that are already full-time staff. Because I don't need to come here today and tell you that if you hire full-time staff, it's going to solve all your issues. What I look for is there people out there, is there departments and municipalities out there that are solving issues, solving their challenges with using hybrid models? So I did find 12. So what we did is we contacted all 12 departments and provided survey with them and gathered information. Once we gathered all that information, we looked to see if would it meet today's challenges in Lloydminster. Now what I want to share with you today is one that I think will solve all of our challenges today. So Langford, BC. It's a suburb out of Victoria, approximately 35,000 people. Very fast growing, something quite like Lloydminster. Lloydminster is a hub city, but a lot of the same challenges from their fire department. They were in our situation not 5 years ago. They were wondering, how can they keep up with the times? How can they evolve for the future of their city? So what they did was actually engage the International Association of Fire Chiefs and look for possible solutions, people that were finding solutions to challenges. So they were given another city out of Texas, Ponderosa, Texas, that had a model. Some models I want to share with you. So Langford operates a mostly volunteer fire department. Now what does mostly volunteer mean? So what Langford has is 3 firemen. They have 8 career staff with a 60 volunteer complement. Their 8 career is the fire chief, 3 deputy chiefs, and 4 captains. Now what's important is they provide 24-hour coverage operating out of one of their fire homes. Now how they do this is they run a 4-shift rotation. So on those 4-shift rotations, there's 1 captain and there's 3 stipend volunteers. Now, stipend, I had to Google what the definition of a stipend was, and it is a premium paid for services. So what they do in Langford is they pay their volunteers a premium to come into the fire hall on weeknights and weekends and provide standby time. They spend their time at the fire hall, they sleep overnight, something like a full-time career department would. And the only thing that the fire department asks of them is they have to provide 2 hours of training time. And then the rest is leisure and they just on standby. So, when we start to look at the strengths, when we really start to look at this model, so the strengths of this is it will provide a balance that is needed. So volunteers in Langford, these stipend volunteers, get to pick and choose when they volunteer. Instead of right now on our fire department, everything is structured on the days in which they have to volunteer. There, a firefighter gets to pick and choose what works best for their employer, what works best for their family, and they get to give back when it's convenient for them. It's also cost effective. Maintaining a hybrid model between stipend volunteers and full-time staff is cost effective compared to just fully staffing fire halls. It's a sustainable model. It's more sustainable than what we're doing today. It allows us to move into the future where we can guarantee our services. Right now, currently, between Sunday at 5 p.m. to Friday at 5 p.m., there's no guarantee of staffing coming out of fire trucks. On weekends, we have shifts where people are signed up where it's 100% mandatory, but between that Sunday at 5 p.m. and Friday at 5 p.m., there's no guaranteed minimum. Historically, we've always gotten fire trucks out, there's no guarantee. This will also provide 24-hour coverage to our city. For a city our size, we'd be able to draw our response time of a fire truck responding to, say, a structure fire vehicle accident by 5 minutes. Now, with any change, there's always weaknesses. One of the weaknesses is it's the biggest operational change ever for our department. So with any change, there's always that potential to lose members. I do want to make everyone aware that I have let the whole membership of the fire department know just prior to me coming to present here in public and to mayor and council, and the buy-in to this program was tremendous. I actually had some comments of when can we start. But there's always that potential to lose members. Now, some of our opportunities. Where can this take us? This gives us the ability to expand our service levels, to expand what we deliver to our community. It gives council the option to look at what does their city need. And it also allows us to attract a more diverse membership. Allows us to attract the volunteers or residents that work shift work. It allows for families. Now the threats. This can be taken as a misconception, a step towards a full-time fire department, which again, I said, has a large cost to it. That is not what I'm doing here today. This isn't a first step, this isn't a second step. If we go to this model, this is a model that can be used for as long as I can see in our city. I'm not saying just adding 4 full-time staff will be the end, but using this hybrid model between stipend volunteers and full-time staff, we can use forever in our city and save money for many, many, many years to come. So we have to look, why now? We have to be realistic and look at the cost associated with a full-time fire department. Those are large expenses. We also have to look at our sustainability. How can we meet today's needs and also the future's needs? We also have a young department in terms of years of experience. So change is generally easier for the less time you've been doing things. Sometimes we get stuck in our ways after a few years. So they're easier to adapt. We also have to look at those future changes coming to the fire service industry. Like I said, those minimum training standards, as well as response times, we have to be prepared for that, and it is coming. Now, the cost, and that's where everyone wants to see. So the cost comparison today, we spend about $570,000 on salaries for the whole fire department. That includes our paid-on-call firefighters, our full-time staff. That number actually does not take into account our new training officer, just due to starting last week. If we were to move to a full-time fire department, I estimate that the cost would be approximately $5 million more than we're spending today. And that's just looking at what other full-time fire departments spend. Now, if we want to move towards this Langford model, I estimate the cost to be at $367,000. That pays for 4 more full-time staff. That pays all of our stipend premium to our paid-on-call firefighters. That also pays for part-time staff to cover the full-time captains to ensure that we will always have 24-hour coverage. So if we get 24-hour coverage, fire department can respond 5 minutes faster with a fire truck to emergencies for $367,000. So I want to open up and really discuss what we see as the long term and where do we see our fire services going in our community.
Councilor?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for a good presentation. Many of us knew for a long time that this would come in some form. You've done a great presentation today. Of course, our concern of everyone in this room is the cost for our community. But your hybrid proposal, first blush made sense when I read it yesterday or on Saturday. Yeah, that makes sense. And but I have a question. It bothered me yesterday. It still bothered me. What would be the threat? Like it says in your report, there's a threat, misconception of full-time fire department. I just didn't catch that in the report. Exactly what you meant.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. So I wanted to be honest. There is a conception of a volunteer fire department and saving a large amount of money. When we look at other municipalities, fire departments take a large portion of their municipal budgets. And I don't want our residents to think that this is the first step in going that direction. This is just a step towards ensuring that we have effective and efficient fire services for today and tomorrow.
I'm just not sure I got that pin. Sorry, the word threat though, to me it's nothing but positive. I don't know what I'm missing. That's what I don't really get.
Thank
How
you.
else can I say it?
No, thank you, and I'm glad you see this as a positive, Councilor Baker. So the threats is that outside source looking in for a SWOT analysis, and that is what I took as what I perceived to be a threat to this model coming into effect, is that perception from our community about their fire services taking form of a full-time fire service and taking more municipal dollars. But if everyone sees this as a benefit, then I would love to take that off the threat list.
See where you're coming from, it's hard to sell.
It's more like a negative. What are the negatives that come with it as opposed to threats? It's just kind of a business term.
Yeah.
So what are the negatives when you move into that particular model? So there's always
I
unintended.
think it would be an easy sell.
I think it would be, Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just wondering here, 8 career and 60 volunteer complement is what Langford BC has, correct? So are they all 60 or the stipend? Yes, no?
Thank you. So with their 60, I believe 99% of them are. What Langford allowed would be the same thing if we went this model. They allow grandfathering through. We understand that not everyone is hired to do that job as a stipend firefighter. And so some of the membership there has opted out. From my conversation, it was very, very few. One other thing, also thing to note is they only hire once a year in Langford for their stipend volunteers. And I believe last time they hired, they had 7 openings and they had 50 applications, and a lot of them already had previous firefighting training.
So do you think with this model that currently we have 29 volunteers, that we're going to have people step up, or what's your recruitment initiative that you have in place to try and recruit more firefighters? If we're currently only at 29, do you think that this implementation of this model is just going to have people line up, or what is your, I guess, initiative to try and recruit more volunteers?
Thank you, Councilor Monroe. So we will take initiatives similar to Langford as far as hiring only once a year unless need be. So we'll be doing marketing campaigns, open houses similar to what we're doing right now. So what we have is a lot of people interested in joining our fire department. Then they find out the requirements, and the requirements are quite high beyond our fire department.
Sure.
And a lot of people opt out at that time. So hopefully with giving flexibility, because this allows firefighters to pick and choose when they want to give their time to the community. So given that flexibility, we should be able to get more members in.
So what is your policy with that then, if people are picking and choosing, but nobody's picking and choosing this designated 14-day stretch just per se, then is there going to be implementation with this process to say that, no, there has to be some people that are, I guess, assigned to those days, or how are you going to do that?
Absolutely, thank you. So we will develop procedures to ensure that every day is filled up, and so everyone is aware. My one feedback I did get from this model was there was some concerns about not being enough stipend shifts to sign up for my membership, because they would like to sign up for 3 a week if they could.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Guychuk, then followed by Councilor Pike.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Great presentation. Over lunch, we were talking with one of the other organizations in the community, and the word shared services came up, so I still had that bouncing in my head. And sort of, I'm really naive to this whole area of firefighting, so my question is stupid. Please forgive me. But one of the things I was thinking about is that when we look at all the different industries they have in our community, and Husky comes to mind as one, and it gets picked on a lot perhaps because it happens to be a big one, but what are their firefighter requirements for their staff? And are there opportunities for us to partner with them? Others like ADM, so the specialized training they might have around how do you put a fire out that is, petroleum fire, liquid natural gas, and those sort of things. Is there a benefit for us where perhaps we share the firefighters and we cover the training and work with these other industries in the community, or is that just a silly idea?
No, thank you, Councilor Diachuk. So there is one industry in our community, it is Husky, our refinery, that does have its own fire service in there. They're provided by their staff and they're trained to their standards. As far as right now, they do not provide any services outside of their gate to our community, but we do have agreements in place for the Lloydminster Fire Department to come in and assist them. But when we look at shared services, that is important. So what we've done in years prior is start to expand what we call our memorandums of understanding, our mutual aid agreements, and that is we do have one with the Arm of Britannia and as well as with Legacy Fire. It is important that we do have our neighbors and we're willing to work with our neighbors for large scale things.
But there's no opportunity really beyond that where we share the training, share the cost and that sort of thing. Because what I'm hearing you say, Husky is provide its own, it's an inside piece, and no other industries like ADM or larger ones that have any opportunities in it at all?
Not that I'm aware of. I know we provide services to ADM currently, both fire suppression, high-angle rescue, things like that.
Thank you.
Councilor Beck next.
Yeah, I think from a taxpayer's point of view, we've been very fortunate to have this system set up for the number of years that we have, and we've come out okay on it, there's no question. A very good system, and you can see not changing from the 70s. We need to take a look at that. One question I had was, as far as what's your hard cost if you've got from a rookie that's just signed up on his first day to when he's able to get out onto the truck? What are our costs involved in that?
Oh, thank you, Councilor Fagan. So the costs are actually very minimal right now because we provide all the training to them. But we provide the training, myself, my deputies, other training officers in the fire department, go in at night on our own time to train the newer members of our fire department to get them certified. We make the investment in our own hours to get them trained. So the same training that goes on in Vermilion in the fire school for, let's say, around $10,000, we do for the cost of a textbook here in Lloydminster. We certify because we do it on our own hours.
And then, so somebody like Kevin there that's got 37 years, how much have you got invested in him?
Too much.
That is a good point though, because we do have a lot as a fire department invested into somebody that's been on our department for over 30 years. And when they leave our department, it is a tremendous loss in the wealth of knowledge that they have experienced over the years.
Absolutely, because I believe I'm not sure where we're at, Chief, and you can correct me, but we have the ability to train to NFPA 1001 within our own department. Or can we go past that to some of the different command courses and things like that? What do we have for capability to help people understand? Because, as you mentioned, we can do a lot what Vermilion can do with our own resources. And thank you to your team and yourself for the commitment you make. But how much further, like as you mentioned, there is a point that we do have to go outside of our own resources to do additional training. Am I correct on that?
Yes, and so over the years, the fire department as well as the city's made the investment into our staff to get them trained as certified instructors. So that allows our staff to come back and share their knowledge. So currently we provide NFPA 1001, so everyone's aware that it's our professional firefighting competencies. 1002, which is your professional driving aerial pump. I know this is kind of mumbo jumbo. But we also do 1041, that's our instructor. We tend to move outside to get our instructor qualifications just because it's nice for an instructor to come back with different departmental knowledge. So we do provide lots of training opportunities to our staff, but it's generally on our own.
Councilor Buckingham, Councilor Fudge.
Thank you, Worship. A couple things that, for those that may not know me as a 20-year firefighter and deputy chief of the surrounding department, fairly aware of what goes on with this as well. I have a family member on Langford, so it's easy to speak of how they appreciate that program in Langford because we talked about this at length. So he's very happy with it. A couple of things for the city. 10 minutes by fire code. Basically, I have somebody roll in 10 minutes to these calls. These guys are doing that. They've been doing it for a long time. They're providing a great service here. And as we travel around, what you guys sitting in the audience may not hear enough of is we were at the SUMA convention last year, and there was big talks of all the full-time fire departments in Saskatchewan and the cost that comes associated with that. And we are the envy of the province of Saskatchewan in that regard, and that wouldn't happen without you guys. So thanks for that. That's something I think people don't know, don't think about, but need to hear. You know, it's a big deal. Chief has shown us the cost comparison between full-time and this new hybrid model, so it's really good to see. I've said for years that it's one of the most stressful, high time-consuming volunteer commitments you can make to any kind of organization at all because of the standards, because of the training, because of the time. The calls happen, I've missed birthday parties, Christmases, and you all have, right? And that's the commitment that it takes. So it doesn't go unnoticed, and it shouldn't. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because if it has gone unnoticed, these are key points as to how this goes. So as a 20-year resident of Lloydminster, thank you for everything you guys do here as well, because there's a lot to it, and I know that, so the residents need to know it too.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. It means a lot to us to hear that, and we do sacrifice a lot of our own time, our personal time, to give back to the community, and we enjoy it. And that is with this program. It allows people to still volunteer, but it allows it to do it on their time, so they can still support their families, things like birthday parties and Christmases, but still give back to their community.
Yeah, I like the model as well, and I think one of the things I'm trying to wrap my head around, I guess, is that we see people that are aging out and want to retire, and then the challenge of bringing young individuals coming on with families. So providing the stipend, who do you attract, or is it more so that you have the ability to put people into blocks of time over the weekend? I'm just trying to think is that if I get a stipend and I have a family scenario, I still have a family scenario. And I like being a firefighter, so I'm going to go when it makes it easier, because you make some money on the side doing that. But I guess the part for me is wanting to see that balance. If you're burning the candle at both ends in the middle, then we also tend to see a higher risk for injury and doing something silly where you're tired and your kid kept you up through the night because they're 3 months old or whatever it is. So I'm just trying to sort out that piece where that the scheduling on the weekend part perhaps is the part that alleviates that issue. But I'm just trying to see how it addresses that issue where you're leaving on the end, you're familyed out on this end, and the stipend now sort of solves it a little bit, but who do you attract that's in the middle?
So I think with this model, we can attract pretty much anyone in any stage of their life, because it gives people the flexibility to pick and choose their times. Right now with the structure we have people sign up for the fire department because it works that month, that they can give their time to the community. But as we all know, the amount of extra time we have changes from month to month, year to year, sometimes day to day. So this allows for them to pick and choose. So hopefully we can move through all stages of people's lives so that we can keep employees for long periods of time.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps you could talk a little bit about other costs associated with if they did implement this. Council capital to residents.
Absolutely. So this cost comparison is only our operational costs. So with that, we would need capital costs. So we do have a plan to turn Station 1, which is our downtown fire hall, into our 24-hour fire hall, and put sleeping accommodations in and minor renovations around the fire hall for approximately $25,000.
Any more questions? Well, I'd like to add my heartfelt thanks, Chief, to the department, to the volunteers that are here today, to the paid staff, and to those that are out working their day jobs and completing for their employers as that perspective. Because I think that as a former volunteer myself, fire department service, it is one of those, it's you gentlemen and ladies that are in that department work together day and night when it happens. You count on each other for your own lives, protection of the people that you work with, but for the people you serve. I don't think there's a better service from that perspective, and the community thanks you very much for that service. I think that we've been very, very fortunate. The Great Fire of 1930 made an adjustment. And, certainly the economics and the growth of our city has brought us to another point. So it's a good point rather rather than having to deal with a severe disaster or issue like that. So I think that I appreciate it very much on behalf of council. We'll look forward to seeing administration bringing some more information back to council in the budget process, I guess, would be the next step, because I think that we all understand the situation. And at the end of the day, as we go back to, and as council is well aware of, it's not a council meeting, we have some needs that need to be dealt with. And fire protection is a responsibility of the municipality. And that's why we're here. And we appreciate the work that you do, and we count on our support to bring the best possible solution to our community. I appreciate that you looked at it and said economics is an important part of it, because at the end of the day, for the people that are gathered around here when it comes to budget, that will be what we'll have to answer to from the greater public. So we thank you very much for your service today, and continue.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
Moving on to item number 6, governance and priority matters. And look at the city manager.
Your Worship and Council, please provide a draft policy with respect to an ethical governance. We are recommending governance audit. It came from a recommendation of the governance audit. It's a draft policy to help guide council and administration in dealing with lobby efforts and attempts to influence decision-making in the process, so it will give you the guide. I will defer to the city clerk, Doug Rodwell, to take you through it.
Thank you, City Manager. City Clerk.
Thank you, City Manager, through the Chair of Council. The idea behind this policy is to ensure decision-making and procurement processes are fair, equitable, and transparent, and any attempt to lobby, sway, alter, or unduly influence decision-making or procurement processes is identified and reported. This policy is not intended to prevent citizens, community groups, or persons with legitimate concerns from engaging with a member of council or administration. I open the floor to council for their comments on the policy, so that we can take that back.
Look, council for any comments. Chair, Council Crouch.
Thanks very much for the work that went into this policy. I think the only question at this point that for me is that when we look at the definition of family, and I know that in the current format that's posted, it goes to spouse, father, mother, brother, sister, son or daughter, grandparent, grandchild, common in-law, and step relationships. And I know in other contexts, when you look at the definition of family, you also extend out to cousins and uncles and aunts. So I don't know, what other communities have used relative to that context. Is that too far out beyond for council? But that was the one thing that stood for me, is that how close is too close, and how far is too far relative to those relationships.
It's a good question, because I think that certainly you can have business relationships, you have family relationships, and business relationships can cross past that point. So it's Councilor Fagan.
Yeah, I think Michael had said previously, there's no harm in throwing out a further net than a smaller one. There's really no harm in it. So I would tend to agree with Councilor Fagan.
If I could just add, I guess that I know that when in former roles, when we talk about family, much of the discussion on family actually has originated around policy for grievance. And so if you were to have 3 days built into your collective agreement where you would visit and attend a funeral, of a family member, the definition of family included cousin, aunt, uncle, and those sorts. And so that definition was then transported over to other parts of the policies, because that was kind of what was understood. So I'm really not familiar with what we have in the contracts, whatever, but that's sort of the background for Mark.
And I can speak to why this definition was chosen, because this mirrors the definition within the charter.
Okay.
So it's certainly within council's purview to widen that if that they so choose and want to instruct us to do so.
Is it possible that even, certainly our acting interim city manager and his experience in other venues and cities and our size and larger, I guess, what's been the experience there?
Well, it is varied. It goes from different municipality to different municipality. You could have cousins and then children of cousins and children of cousins, So you end up with those types of situations. I like the idea of perhaps cousins, aunts, uncles, cousins, is part of the definition. I think it broadens it and makes it much clearer. and there's no question, right, in terms of how it plays out. But it's what's in the charter, what's in the Municipal Government Act, is, you know, in terms of pecuniary interest. These are those.
Okay.
Yeah, you can broaden it if you so desire, and I have no reason. I agree with Councilor Fagnan. There's no problem with clarifying what you really mean in your bylaw or policy.
So I'm hearing this is consistent with what's in the MGA at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And sure.
And the charter, yeah.
Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. So in relation to relatives and family, you guys chose that piece basically word for word out of the charter because that's what it said there?
Yeah, and that was the direction that we you know, council can always direct us to expand it. We wanted to give a starting point, if you will.
Yes. So as we asked the city manager just now, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing if, as we come back to this again, if there were some examples of other municipalities as to how they worded that, and if it did include that further reaching net, as it will. I'm in favor of that as well, but I wondered if there was some other research that could be done on that part of it to see if there was examples.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you.
Your Worship, the extension, I guess now I asked, I was thinking this through, given that it's in the charter, would we have to change the charter if we put this in place, or would it be in contravention of our charter?
No,
So-
we're allowed to be more restricted within our policies.
Okay.
Not less restricted.
Okay.
Councillor Victor.
Thank you, Your Worship. The benefit of the most here, we, as a city council in the last year, have just gone through the code of conduct. And when I read this, there's nothing wrong with it. But it's another policy. And how many policies we need, I'm not so sure. We don't need 250 policies. The thicker the book, the less people look at it. I was just wondering if some amendments to the code of conduct would do the same thing if you felt that the code of conduct wasn't sufficient. You might want to look at that.
Currently, the code of conduct deals with council, and you see within the policy it talks about, there's two streams here. We have an administrative dealing and
administration
a council
as well.
dealing. So this sort of marries those two pieces together. But if there was a transgression of, say, this policy that would be passed by a council member, it would be dealt with by the code of conduct bylaw, which absolutely would have to be looked at to see if it was updated. And if it was a transgression by an administrative member, then it would be dealt with through disciplinary channels, depending on the person's position.
Point taken, Councillor Baker. I think that certainly when the administration and I chatted about this was looking at it from the outside strictly from that perspective, where the code of conduct looks at the actions of a councillor. This in turn sets some direction for both someone, a councillor or a mayor, and someone simply coming off the street. And as the city clerk advised, it's not to hinder anyone from approaching any councillor or mayor at any time, but ensure where there's an interest beyond simply raising a concern to you or myself or any of the council members. This is more where there's likely an economic interest, be it one form or another. I think this gives a little bit of direction and brings some more clarity and transparency to the process, because certainly in the process of business there can be some misconception, and this helps to alleviate some of that misconception that there's everything is open and transparent. I think that was the intention, and I sat down with the administration and discussed this, and we brought this forward the first time, just the idea. I said, yeah, it adds to our transparency from that perspective as elected officials doing business in the community. So that was the main thrust of why we were into that from that perspective.
I guess, Your Worship, if it was all inclusive, you'd have one document to go to. I don't know if you can do that, but I've read both. And trust me, the code of conduct, a lot of time was spent on that, and it was open and transparent to the public. For those who weren't around, it took about 4 months or 6 months or something to get that, fine-tuned, if you want to put it that way. And with a lot of legal opinions and And that's why I wondered if some of that stuff that's within the code of ethics should be included, but that's fine.
I just want to clarify, just so that there's not any gray area. So with the procurement, or if we have people that just, I mean, if you're active in the community, you have people come up to you with concerns. They're voicing their concerns about possible ice hockey time or pool time or anything. Not that they're necessarily wanting to sway your decision, but that they're just trying to clarify and give you information, even if they're just trying to rant maybe. And your decision is somehow not necessarily weighed, but you're collecting all that information. Is this, I just don't, no issue, okay. I just want to completely clarify exactly what, okay. Just because even this little bit of rental, so would that be rental pool time, rental ice time, anything?
Yeah, but those are, you know, those are matters which would be pecuniary in interest or would be to the benefit of someone, the individual counselor or the counselor's family, right? They would be of interest to those groups, not-for-profit groups. I'm sure you'll be lobbied by those all the time.
Right.
And every coffee shop and everywhere you go, and that's part of being a counselor. But if a businessman comes and wants to lobby you, buy you dinner, give you gifts, then there's and they're doing business with the city, that's a different story. And I think that's what this is about. It's about the lobby side of it, being fair with all parties rather than favoring one party.
Perfect. Sorry, I just read over it so many times that it kind of ran into each other.
Sure.
I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Dykstra?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think the other part too for me, and I honestly I haven't read the code of conduct to be able to rattle it off, I guess, but the one thing I think that's important about what I see here in this document is that it really articulates the behavior of those people that are coming to see you. They want to use their influence to influence you to do business with them. And I think that's the part that sort of just comes through loud and clear through this process. Whereas I think in the code of conduct file it says you're to act in such a way as that, you know, if there's pecuniary interest, you back away and that sort of thing. This is more directly saying, hey, look, if you're a business person, you're coming over, you're trying to do this, stop, this has to go through these channels. I'm going to report this meeting so that it's not me that's going to give you any leverage on making a decision. And that for me is the part in the flavor in this document that is, I think, stronger and clearer about the behavior of those people that are coming to see you, less than in the code of conduct, which is more about our behavior.
My story was just part of this could be put into that.
Well, absolutely, I don't disagree, yeah.
That's good.
Any other questions or comments for the administration?
Just one other comment. This is a policy, not a bylaw. This is what we're proposing. So if you wanted it in your code of conduct bylaw, we would bring that forward if you needed direct us to do that.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think I'm personally comfortable with it being a policy, and from that perspective, certainly it's one of those policies that we need to be aware of, certainly as the next time, the next election, new council potentially, whoever that is, should be aware of that policy, because that's one of the activities that they can expect to maybe incur, and that will be covered off in orientation. It's always there for reference. If you're unsure, go back and check on the policy. So I think we've given the city administration some direction about, especially about that clarification about relatives and family, and see if there's more information. That would be good.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Moving on to 6.2, Council Professional Development Policy. To the City Manager.
Yes, Your Worship and Council, what we're looking for here is a draft professional development policy that was recommended by the governance audit. So we drafted this draft policy to guide council members when seeking professional development. And Dan Hobson, Daniel, will come forward and make the presentation on the draft.
Good afternoon, Daniel. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. Good afternoon, council members. I can't really say it much better than the city manager just did there. We drafted this policy to help engineers through any professional development decisions, and happy to answer any questions or take any feedback at this point.
So I guess I'll start with some of the policy I was looking at that it is, as a policy, it gives us direction, but it's not an actual bylaw that has to be, what we see the policy isn't firm and cut and dried. We have the ability to alter it by resolution, is that, from that perspective?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
I guess my concern is just with 5.3, a member of council wishing to attend a professional development event shall seek approval by resolution of council. Just, I feel as though if, for some reason, Councillor Buckingham or yourself was out of town, going to be out of town, and you couldn't attend a professional development, one that you had really wanted to because you had a prior engagement, but then that prior engagement got canceled and you were available to attend, I feel like it's very hard to get all of council together to provide that resolution. And I mean, that could happen, right? There could be a conference that you really wanted to attend, but you had a prior engagement, that one ended up getting canceled, and then you had the ability to go to this one, which would be significantly beneficial, but then we can't get all of council together to provide that resolution. Is that?
I think you've got a good point. I think the intention is that at the beginning of the year or when you pass your budget, that there will be identification by each councillor of the courses and conferences and training that you would like to attend.
Right.
So that would be approved or in a council resolution,
Right.
whether it's the budget resolution or a specific resolution for training and development for councillors.
Right.
Once that's done, you wouldn't have to ask permission. So if you have to cancel, it has provisions. If you were planning not to go and then you decide to go and it's in your budget, I think you're welcome to participate.
Okay, you don't have to go through
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's not the intention to wrap you up so that you can't go without council permission, but you can't. But what we're doing is saying you could, at the beginning of the year, you'll get that permission if you have it in your budget. You listed them off and say, this is the cost. This conference is $1,500. It's going to cost $500 for travel. And that's in your annual budget.
Right, and if he's under, he could still go without
Right.
our, okay.
And if you don't go, you don't go. And if you
Right.
go, fine.
Perfect, okay, thanks, just for that clarification.
Councillor Blanchard?
Thank you. I think it's a great first start. We've had some discussion with a couple of people around us. What's the right number of members to attend? I mean, and those are all starting places, and I think it's important, and that can vary depending on the issue. And one of the things I like to see sort of embedded in here a little more is that you mentioned that as it relates to the city business, I would even suggest we go further to say the strategic priorities of the city, rather than more than just the business of the city. So if we are targeting 5 goal areas or 3 goal areas as the most important piece, then we should be targeting those areas because that's the most important business for us. And I guess I put that up to City Council as well, of the rest of the council, is that yes, there's a lot that we do around the business for the city, but if the 3 priorities over here and we want to go to this, which is not related to that year, then is that really getting the best bang for our buck, where we should be targeting those goals? And as you mentioned in there, we're expected to come back to the GPC and say, here's what we accomplished relative to our priorities, because you're reporting back to the priorities committee, and that's, for me, is that connection and link back there. So the challenge obviously for me as well is when we look at the conferences, that we know what's on the agenda when we're saying at the beginning of the year, and we don't. And I think to some degree there's a bit of a guess around what's available in there, and that's a part of the challenge when you have a policy like this. But I think the other issue for us is that after year 1, we should get better at year 2 and year 3 and year 4 relative to where do we put our time. But I think the guide up front should be, a bit about the training, certainly as council, either AUMA or SUMA. But the second part would be is making sure that we address the priorities of the city. If it's downtown, or revitalization, then doggone it, we should be attending those sessions in those areas. If it's economic development, then yes, those should be the priorities. But there should be a visible link that's obvious to everybody that here are the city priorities and here's where your city council is working to get better at and learn more about. So that would be a part I would want to massage on.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I think you're right. We can absolutely take that back and massage that in. Just another comment to your one point. These are just starting points. So as the time goes on, if there's, we've listed the big 3 conferences there. If time goes on and there's a conference that this council finds very valuable, by all means, we can bring that into that policy and then submit. Can become a mandatory attending conference, if you will. So
just as a follow-up, have we, historically, what budget have we set for city and city council? So, without knowing the budget, honestly, but in November, we all went down to SUMA. and away we went, and I can say it was valuable for me on two levels. One is to network, and the other was to, you know, some of the educational components and training. But I would be a little more, I guess, focused in terms of some of the things that I want to go see. But do we have a historical budget? So we have a starting place, and I guess what were we able to accomplish with those budgets in the past relative to it? So, and then so we, you know, I don't know how it plays out or how it's broken up, but is it roughly 5,000 a piece, so you have a budgeting starting place? And maybe I don't go this year to all of them, so someone else can go somewhere, you know, to a conference that's more important as well. But it'd be nice to have a, you know, somewhere outside of this policy, I guess, as we go to budgeting, to have that historical path as how much we spent.
And I wouldn't have that information offhand.
Does that make sense? So I guess for the, I guess Scott's back there, does that make sense relative to budgeting and forecasting, I guess? I don't know.
Each department will budget for council travel as well as the staff travel.
Okay. And I believe we'll be looking at that very shortly from my office, talking about budgets, because certainly there's a series of meetings, and, you know, starting in February right through January. It's usually 1 month, but there's no meetings, but we have SUMA, AUMA, and FCM that are listed here. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities, for those listening, Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, and Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association. One of the things I'll share is that because of our bi-provincial nature, and from our new council, I felt it was very important that we attend SUMA, which we did, and councils all the way to hopefully attend AUMA in Calgary because of that nature. Whereas after traveling to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference convention in Ottawa, a lot of councils only have one convention outside. We are very fortunate that we have two conventions that have an interest, because we have an interest on both sides of the border. It's in our key interest to be lobbying when we have the opportunity to network with politicians at the provincial level in Saskatchewan as well as Alberta, working with the mayors, from my perspective, and the councils on the respective cities and communities adjacent to us on both sides of the border. So that adds a different dimension that most communities do not see. I know I met different community representatives at the convention in Ottawa, and they said, oh, this is our big convention. I go, well, we've got two that we have to do on a provincial level. Oh, wow, that adds a whole different dynamic. So I think that's important. As well as we have a series, and I know I've attended a series of meetings both provincially on both sides of the border. The mayors of Saskatchewan meet on a regular basis, discuss issues that reflect on a city perspective, that towns, villages, and other municipalities in Saskatchewan don't quite face the same challenges as we do with the Alberta. And we also have an additional, the Mid-Sized Mayors Caucus of Alberta, which we have the opportunity to host, as well as the Northern Alberta Mayors meet, because again, and the Reeves, because there's issues from an economic perspective, again, relationships with the provincial government. It really comes down to, because we are a child, as it's referred to, of the province. We're here because of the province legislation. The relationship we have is so unique, and because we have two of those relationships to maintain, it gets very critical that we ensure that we spend the time there, but without missing anything. And I think there's other opportunities for this council to develop, because if we have interest that outside of simply the legislative municipal items, be it recreation, be it culture, be it sporting, the public safety, because certainly it's all plays part into it. So I think there's options that we need to look at, and we'll be discussing that with council members to ensure that if you have an interest in something that meets, and I agree with Councilor Nychuk, that the strategic plan that we're going to be discussing more and more with people in the next 2 weeks, that is very key, because I think we want to build on the momentum we have and where we want to go. Any other comments to send back to administration, Councilor Baker?
Well, we made your words of Bennington, and certainly our new council has been exposed to the SUMA convention last year. I don't know if you're at the AUMA, or did you miss that?
No, we didn't make it because the
UMA
is in October before the election.
But I think it's absolutely critical. The council looks at getting many people to go as possible in administration. You'll have 6 and 8 workshops going at once. Well, if you only have one person there, they can cover one workshop out of 7 or 8. And some of them are very important. And I think that when you're looking at that particular agenda, You know, it's really important that something that's been introduced is some of the staff attending. Because there are sections, for example, today, fire. If fire is a big thing and it's on the agenda, maybe Jordan should attend. You know, if he can get away for a day. And maybe you look at it in the bigger picture. Because he knows a lot more about what's going on in that world than most of us would. And those are things to consider when you're doing that. So I'm not talking about the budget so much right now with his lieutenants, and then you can figure out the budget from there. But I do know that over the years, when I was on council, we'd say, okay, here's the agenda. You attend session A, you attend session B, you do C. So we're not all at one session. And we get it covered properly. And we should bring back a report on those workshops as best we can and explain to the rest of council and administration what's going on there that you don't read in the general distribution through Sumer Radio Mace. I think that's really important for the learning curve of what's going on in both provinces. Thank you.
Just one other advantage of attending, because often you request meetings with ministers, and I think it's really healthy to have all your councillors present at those types of meetings. It demonstrates a commitment to the issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think this is going to gear to not just past SUMA and AIMA. I think it's those other areas of interest that council may have as individual members, but feel that a conference can bring back some information, working with administration, because any conference will be attended by administration. In some cases, they're already attending, maybe having someone from council helps bring some different perspective as well from the elected officials, because those conferences do exist.
If I could just add to Councillor Baker's comment, I think the one thing that I appreciated when we went down to SUMA is that we had the whole city council attend, and were able to, you know, do a bit of team building, talk about some issues, you know, find out where we stood, and at the same time, while we were discussing many of the issues that were in our sessions. And you should have heard what I heard, and I heard this, and you know, so over the supper and the time we were together, traveling there and back, and those were all, you know, excellent opportunities to talk about, to explore, and also to learn about each other in terms of where we come from. So, I mean, that piece is also pretty, I would say, pretty important and valuable for city councils, particularly in that first year. It was for me. I absolutely agree with that. But we also have a budget. So I think that's balancing those two pieces, and certainly wanting to see that historical cost, I think, because I've never seen what that real number is.
We'll be sure to get that.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you, Councilor.
Good job.
That brings us to item number 7, inquiries from the media.
Today we have media requests for yourself and others. Councilor Diacek and Councilor Buckingham.
Before we break, I should have checked if there was any other matters, and I see City Clerk has brought them to my attention, so I'll turn it to City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. We just wanted to bring to Council's attention and the community's attention. Today, in fact this morning, we received a somewhat sophisticated phishing attempt directed towards our finance department. The attempt was focused on attempting to defraud the city for approximately $47,000. Our procedures and protocols identified the attempt as an attempt fraudulently to access our direct monies. The RCMP have been notified and are investigating. The good news is that our procedures and protocols quickly identified this attempted fraud, and it can serve as a good reminder to the community to be vigilant against these types of events.
Thank you, City Clerk. That's very good information to be aware of, so thank you. With that, I would look to Council for a recommendation for recess.
So,
Councilor Diacek, so moves. Councilor Fagin seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
it's actually a good one to hear. That's a good Yes, there will be a TV